So, I had another video planned for this week, but I've decided to push that back to next week as this story was too big to sweep under the rug. So in case you were somehow unaware, it was revealed last week that Marc Marquez, despite having 1 year left on his contract, would be leaving Honda at the end of the season, bringing to an end an 11-season partnership. And although it hasn't been confirmed yet at the time of recording, it looks highly likely that Marc will be partnering alongside his brother at Gresini next season, riding a year-old Ducati. For some who don't watch MotoGP on a regular basis, this may sound like a bizarre move. To go from a lucrative factory Honda ride, which has garnered 6 Premier Class titles, to a privateer team that will run 2023 Ducatis instead of 2024 Ducatis may sound like a downgrade and may sound surprising given the stature of rider we are talking about here. However, for those that do regularly watch MotoGP, such as myself, the announcement hasn't come as a surprise, and it has been boiling for quite a while. But given how successful the Marc Marquez-Honda partnership has been, one has to ask, what happened, and how did we get to this point? In 2008, a young Marc Marquez made his debut in the MotoGP fraternity via the old 125cc class, which today is now known as Moto3, given the increase in cc's the series now runs. Riding a Repsol-backed KTM, and despite missing the first 2 races of the season, Marc had a very good first season, finishing a respectable 13th in the championship and taking his first ever podium at the British Grand Prix at Donington Park. Still wish MotoGP raced there, to be honest. It's much better than Silverstone. Anyways, back to the topic in hand. Sticking with KTM for 2009, this time with Red Bull backing, Marc would go better than 2008, finishing 8th in the championship and picking up another podium along the way, this time at his home race at Jerez. Then, at the turn of the decade, and with his team Ayo switching to derby bikes, the potential that was seen in Marc was finally able to shine. Taking his first ever win in Mugello, he would follow that up by taking 9 more wins that season, and with it, win his first world title. And for anyone who is not familiar, the classes below the Premier class are also classed as world championships. So for example, Valentino Rossi is a 9-time world champion, however 2 of those championships would come in the 125 and 250cc classes respectively, with the other 7 coming from the Premier class. For 2011, Marc would move up to Moto2, formerly known as the 250cc class, riding a Suter bike, and he would carry the speed over that he demonstrated in the 125cc class into Moto2. Despite a shaky start to the season, retiring in the first 2 races of the season, and then finishing down in 21st in the 3rd race of the season, he would take his first ever Moto2 win at Le Mans, and he would pick up 6 more wins that season, immediately making him a championship contender. Battling with Stefan Bradl for the title, Marc looked to be the quicker of the 2, and it looked like that Marc, in only his first ever season in Moto2, would grab the title off of Bradl. However, any chance he had of winning the title would come to a sudden halt. During free practice at the penultimate race in Malaysia, Marc would fall off his bike and would suffer from an eye injury in the process, the eye injury in question being diplopia, a condition that would make your eye see double vision. Because of this eye injury, Marc was forced to sit out the last 2 races of the season, handing the title to Stefan Bradl. He would thankfully recover from the eye injury and was able to race again in 2012. However, after just missing out on the title in 2011, Marc's target for 2012 was clear: win the title. And that's exactly what he did. Apart from 2 races that season, one of which being a retirement and the other being a disqualification, Marc in every race that he finished would finish on the podium bar 1, taking 9 wins in the process, 1 less than his 125cc title win in 2010 to win his 2nd world title in his 2nd season in Moto2. It was a dominant season that would see him win the title by 59 points ahead of future teammate Pol Espargaro. The next step for Marc was obviously the Premier class, MotoGP. However, where he would ride would be a mystery. Many people believed that it would be the LCR Honda team that he would ride for, given it was, along with Gresini at the time, the official satellite team for Repsol Honda, given Marc's links with Repsol. However, when it was announced that reigning world champion at the time, Casey Stoner, would be retiring from MotoGP at the end of the season to the shock of everyone, it left a vacant ride at Repsol Honda. And guess who would get that ride? In July 2012, it was revealed that Marc Marquez will be going straight to the Repsol Honda team in 2013 to replace the retiring Casey Stoner and partner alongside fellow Spaniard Dani Pedrosa. It was later revealed by Casey himself a number of years later that if he didn't retire at the end of 2012, Marc would have still been at Repsol Honda for 2013, but instead would have replaced Pedrosa instead of Casey. Like with many fans, I'm still gutted we never got to see Stoner versus Marquez. How amazing would that have been if they were teammates? It probably wouldn't have ended well, but it would have been something to see. But even so, Marc had made it to the big time, and given he would already be on factory equipment in 2013, there would be a lot of attention and pressure on his shoulders. So how would he cope with it all in his rookie season? Well, let's find out. The first race of the season would take place as per usual in Qatar. Qualifying wasn't exactly great for Marc as he qualified down in 6th, a row behind his teammate Pedrosa and 19th off pole sitter Jorge Lorenzo. But given it was his first race, people didn't really expect too much from him. However, come race day, he would show everyone why there was so much hype around him. Despite having a bad start, which saw him drop down to 8th, he would immediately carve his way back through the field, getting up to the podium place at the beginning of lap 4, passing the Tech 3 Yamaha of Cal Crutchlow. He would then stick behind his teammate Dani Pedrosa for many laps until with 6 laps to go, he passed him on the pit straight to move up to 2nd. However, it would not be that secure, as in the closing stages of the race, he would end up battling the guy who he once hero worshipped and would become a thorn in his side in future seasons. That man being 9-time world champion Valentino Rossi, who was entering his first race back on a Yamaha after a frustrating 2 years with Ducati. With 3 laps to go, Rossi was able to go down the inside of Marc at turn 4 to take 2nd place. However, a lap later, Marc, thanks to the straight line speed of the Honda, was able to repass Rossi the next lap into turn 1. However, this doesn't last long as Rossi repasses him at the same corner he passed him on the previous lap. Marc would stick with Valentino for the remainder of the race, but he wouldn't be able to find a way back past. As Jorge Lorenzo crossed the line to take a dominant win, Marquez crossed the line in 3rd, just behind his hero Rossi. Even though Rossi beat him in the end, the fact that he took his first ever Premier Class podium in his first ever race, combined with the fact that he beat his more experienced teammate convincingly, made everyone take notice. Little did we know, it would lead to something truly amazing. At the following race at COTA, which would be the first ever time MotoGP visited the circuit, he would go on to take his first ever pole position. And then, the next day, in only his 2nd ever race, he came through to take his first ever Premier Class win by over a second ahead of teammate Dani Pedrosa. If people weren't taking notice of Marc at Qatar, they certainly were at COTA. Even though it was his 2nd ever race, he already demonstrated a level of maturity and didn't seem to be fazed when he was leading the race, not even when he initially lost the lead to Pedrosa at the start. COTA would end up becoming the first of a few fortresses that Marc would be strong at over the coming years. For the next few races, he would continue to fight with Lorenzo and teammate Pedrosa, who would end up being his rivals during the season. However, at the Dutch Grand Prix, the championship would take a dramatic turn. During a wet practice session, Jorge Lorenzo fell off towards the end of the lap and ended up breaking his collarbone. He was able to take part in the race and finish a respectable 5th, however at the next meeting at the Sachsenring, he would end up having a high side and do further damage to his collarbone, ruling him out of the race. He wouldn't be the only one ruled out, as Dani Pedrosa would also be sidelined from the race due to also suffering from a broken collarbone during practice. With both of them being injured and not being 100% when they returned the following meeting at Laguna Seca, Marc took full advantage of this and won 4 races in a row at the Sachsenring, Laguna Seca, Indianapolis and Brno. He would finish 2nd at Silverstone after fighting for the win with a fully recovered Jorge Lorenzo and would finish 2nd again at Misano before taking another win at Aragon. He then finished 2nd to teammate Pedrosa at Malaysia, meaning going into Phillip Island, Marc had his first opportunity to wrap up the title should he win and both Lorenzo and Pedrosa finish 3rd or lower. However, this wouldn't happen, as due to the race being a flag to flag, which means riders are allowed to change their bikes as a result of tyre degradation being a concern, sounds familiar to something that happened this past weekend in Formula 1, Marquez was black flagged for not pitting at the mandatory pit stop window, allowing Lorenzo and Pedrosa to slice his lead in the championship. A 2nd place finish behind Lorenzo at Motegi would see the championship go down to the wire, with a gap being 13 points between himself and Lorenzo, with Pedrosa officially out of the title fight. Going into the finale in Valencia, Marquez just had to finish in the top 4 and the championship would be his. After starting on pole, Marquez would lose places to both Lorenzo and teammate Pedrosa, with both Lorenzo and Pedrosa continuously switching places. Eventually, after many laps of battling, the pair would collide, sending each other wide and giving the lead to Marquez. This wouldn't last long for Marc, however, as Lorenzo and Pedrosa would eventually pass him once again. Jorge Lorenzo crossed the line to win the final race of the season. However, with Marquez in third, it meant that in only his rookie season, Marc Marquez would become the 2013 MotoGP World Champion. Despite immense pressure from both Lorenzo and Pedrosa throughout the season, Marc held his nerve, and when both had their injuries halfway in the season, Marc took advantage and accumulated enough points to become the youngest ever Premier Class champion and the first rookie to win the title since Kenny Roberts Sr. in 1978. Whilst it was impressive, it's fair to say that if it wasn't for Lorenzo getting injured at both Assen and the Sachsenring, Lorenzo would have more than likely have retained his title from 2012 as he looked to be the fastest rider throughout that season. However, if people thought that Lorenzo or Pedrosa would take the title away from him in 2014, they were very much mistaken. First race of the season, pole and the victory, despite immense pressure from Valentino Rossi. Then afterwards, complete domination, as in the first 10 races of the season, he would win all of them, with none of his rivals having an answer. Then, after his streak ended at Brno, thanks to his teammate Dani Pedrosa, he would pick up 3 more wins at Silverstone, Sepang and Valencia to win his second Premier Class title and his 4th world title in total. He would end up losing the title in 2015 to Jorge Lorenzo due to Yamaha stepping up a gear compared to Honda, even without the infamous kick from Valentino Rossi that year, which put an end to their friendship. However, in 2016, Marquez and Honda would bounce back, and after a brief title battle with new arch nemesis Valentino Rossi, he would come through to win his 5th world title, despite only taking 5 wins that year, reclaiming the title that he lost in 2015. Then afterwards, it would set the trend for the next few years, as from 2017 to 2019, he would win 3 more world titles, establishing new rivalries with the likes of Andrea Dovizioso, who was riding a Ducati, and having great battles in 2019 with the Rookie of the Year that season and future world champion Fabio Quartararo. It seemed that no matter what his rivals tried, no one could get a grip of the Marquez-Honda combination. Undoubtedly the best rider in the world at this point, and with him signing a new 4-year deal with Honda at the beginning of 2020, it seemed that no one was going to stop them. However, little did we know at the time after he re-signed with Honda that it would end up being the start of one of the most dramatic downfalls in MotoGP history. I've already talked about this in length in my 2020 MotoGP video, which you can check out in the card in the top right. However, for those who aren't aware, let me give you a brief summary. At the first race of the season at Jerez, Marc Marquez, after fighting back through the field from an earlier mistake, would end up having a high side at the exit of turn 3, breaking his right humerus in the process, the bone that connects the shoulder to the elbow. He would end up having surgery in the days after the race, and he would return to Jerez the following weekend, where he hoped to compete in the second race of the rescheduled season. However, after taking part in both the Saturday free practice sessions, he would end up withdrawing from the event due to the amount of pain that he was suffering. This led to him withdrawing for the rest of 2020, which in turn ended his streak of titles, leading to future teammate Joan Mir to win his first and to date only Premier Class title. Marc would have more surgery throughout 2020 to try and regain some strength in his right arm, and would train throughout 2020 and during the off-season as well to prepare him for his expected return in 2021, with him doing some shakedowns as well to get used to being back on a bike. However, despite his preparations, he would miss the first 2 races of 2021, both of which were at Losail due to the pandemic at the time, in order to get himself fully ready for his actual return at the 3rd race of the season in Portimao. Many people were expecting that once Marc made his return, he would straight away be back to his best, given how much of a freak he had been during his championship winning years, with many even believing that he would win the title, despite missing the first 2 races of the season. In qualifying, it seemed that he had lost none of his speed, as he ended up qualifying a respectable 6th on the grid, a row behind the early championship leader going into that race, Fabio Quartararo. Despite having a great start which saw him go up to 3rd, it was very clear that Marc was not 100%, as he would end up dropping down the order as the laps went on. He would end up finishing a respectable 7th, which was not a bad effort given he hadn't been on a bike in nearly 9 months. He would finish 9th at the next race in Jerez, but would then crash out for the next 3 races races, one of them being Le Mans, where he was fighting for the win in changeable conditions. However, at the Sachsenring, Marquez reminded everyone of how good he was, as after an amazing ride and despite immense pressure from Miguel Oliveira, he came through to take his first win since Valencia 2019. It was an amazing and emotional moment and a result that everyone was happy to see. After being out for the entirety of 2020, seeing Marc back on the top step of the podium was an amazing sight to see. Despite this though, it was not a sign that Marquez was back, as given the Sachsenring was an anti-clockwise circuit, it meant that Marc's limitations on his right arm were not that affected. But the fact that he was able to prove he still had the speed to win races, people were wondering how long it would be before Marquez was 100% again with the clockwise tracks. After finishing mid-pack at Assen, the second half of the season would prove to be a strong point in Marc's 2021 season, as he was able to finish 4th in the first Austria race and was then fighting for the win in the second Austria race thanks to changeable conditions again like at Le Mans. He wouldn't win the race though, due to him taking a gamble on wet tyres towards the end of the race. A retirement at Silverstone was followed by a second place finish at Aragon after fighting with another future world champion Pecco Bagnaia for the win. After a 4th place finish at Misano, Marc would then take back-to-back wins to add to the win that he got at the Sachsenring, at the anti-clockwise Austin circuit, and at the second Misano race dubbed the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix after he inherited the lead from Pecco Bagnaia due to the Italian falling off at the closing stages, handing the title to Fabio Quartararo. But even during that race, Marc demonstrated some brilliant pace to keep up with Pecco, and you have to take into account that the circuit itself was not an anti-clockwise circuit. With Marc taking his first win for a long time on a clockwise circuit, people were thinking that the real Marc Marquez was finally back and was expecting him to challenge for the victory in the last 2 races of the season. However, he wouldn't get a chance to do so, as in the days before the Algarve Grand Prix, aka the second Portimao race, it was announced that Marquez would miss the final 2 races of the season due to a bicycle accident which gave him a concussion, which aggravated the old eye injury that he had in 2011. Despite a tricky return, Marc ended up finishing the championship in a respectable 7th place, which would have more likely have been higher had he not missed the first 2 races of the season and also the last 2 races as well. With Marc out for the rest of the season, the focus was now on 2022, and after a strong end to the season, people were expecting Marc and Honda to be back to challenging for the title once again. However, that didn't happen. Despite looking strong in the first race of the season, he could only manage 5th. Then, at the next meeting at the first ever race at Mandalika, Marc would end up withdrawing from the race and subsequently the next race at Argentina due to breaking his hand during free practice. He would return at Kota, where he was expected to win the race given he won at the circuit the previous season. However, after an issue getting off the start line, he was only able to recover to 6th. The next 3 races he would finish in the top 6, with one of them being a 4th place finish at Jerez. However, at the Italian Grand Prix at Mugello, Marc called a press conference to announce to everyone that he would be out of action for a while due to needing surgery on his right arm again, this time to fix the limitations that had been affecting him since he returned to the sport in 2021. After successful surgery on his right arm again, he would return at Aragon but would crash out of the race. Marc would return to the podium 3 races later at Phillip Island by taking 2nd place, just missing out on the win to Alex Rins. He would achieve 1 more points finish in Malaysia before crashing out at the finale in Valencia. He ended the season 13th in the championship as a result of missing most of the season. However, if he was expecting a big turnaround in 2023 with Honda, he was very much mistaken. During pre-season testing, Marc was unhappy with the 2023 Honda, claiming that the bike that Honda had produced would not be capable of competing for the title. Despite the amount of improvements Honda tried to do during the off-season, nothing seemed to be clicking, and when the free practice sessions concluded at the first race of the season at Portimao, it looked like that what Marc was saying during the off-season had some truth. However, when he shockingly took pole position for the new sprint race and the main Grand Prix itself, it looked like a miracle had happened. Despite not being able to convert the pole, he would finish 3rd in the sprint race. However, in the main race itself, he would end up crashing into the back of home favourite Miguel Oliveira, not only putting him out of action for a bit, but also putting himself out of action for the next few races due to suffering a fractured right hand, which he would yet again need surgery for. He would return at Le Mans, but it was very clear that he was not enjoying riding the Honda, as not only would he crash out at Le Mans, but he would also crash out at the next race at Mugello. Then, after crashing out many times during practice at the Sachsenring, Marc would end up withdrawing from the race and also from the next race at Assen due to suffering from broken ribs. After crashing so many times due to him having to push beyond the limit to get something out of the bike, it was starting to become clear that the rumoured tension that was going on between Marc and Honda was starting to boil to the surface. After crashing out at Silverstone on his return, and after finishing a dismal 13th and 12th at Austria and Barcelona respectively, his results would slightly pick up at Misano and at the first ever Indian Grand Prix at Buda, with Marc even getting a third place finish in the sprint race before falling off in the main race and only managing to finish 9th. Then at Honda's home race in Motegi, Marc would finally get some good luck by grabbing his first podium in the shortened rain affected race since Australia the previous season. However, despite finishing on the podium, Marc's frustration with the team had still not gone away, with him even suggesting in the previous races that he may have to consider his future with the team. Before the meeting at India, Marc would test a prototype version of the 2024 Honda, with Honda hoping they could convince Marc to stick it out for 2024. However, after those tests had concluded, Marc's opinion of the 2024 bike was exactly the same as his opinion of the 2023 bike. After those opinions were published, it was starting to become clear that Marc might actually leave Honda after all. And so, on the 4th of October 2023, 3 days after grabbing that podium in Motegi, it was officially confirmed that despite having 1 year left on his contract, Marc Marquez would be leaving the team at the end of the season. After an 11-season spell, which garnered a total of 6 Premier Class titles, the Marquez-Honda relationship was officially over. And so we have arrived at the present day, and we go back to those 2 questions that I asked at the beginning of the video. What happened, and how did we get to this point? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it seems that the whole downfall of Marc Marquez's relationship with Honda started when he had that unfortunate injury in 2020 that undoubtedly cost him his 9th world title. When Marc was out for the entirety of the 2020 season, Honda was struggling to fight for victories, as Marc's younger brother Alex Marquez and Stefan Bradl, the man who replaced Marc, struggled to adapt and get the best out of the machinery they were riding. However, I think it is fair to say that Honda's downfall in performance actually started during Marquez's championship winning years. Allow me to explain. When Marc made his debut in the Premier Class in 2013, he was partnered alongside Dani Pedrosa, who he would partner alongside with until the end of 2018. During his first season, Pedrosa was relatively level with Marc throughout the 2013 season, despite breaking his collarbone during the German Grand Prix, which he didn't fully recover from until a couple of races later. However, as the seasons went by, the gap between Marc and Dani was gradually increasing, to the point where Dani himself was slipping down the pecking order, whilst Marc was still at the front, challenging for victories and championships. It was very clear that the reason why the gap was increasing was because there was a clear shift in the way Honda built and developed their bikes, as the years went by, the Honda was being catered more towards Marc's riding style, making it difficult for Marc's teammates, and even at times the LCR boys, to adapt and keep up with Marc. This, combined with the numerous amounts of injuries that he suffered, led to Dani retiring from MotoGP at the end of the 2018 season, becoming a test rider for KTM and doing the odd wildcard race for the team from 2022. For 2019, Marc would be partnered by his 2013 rival Jorge Lorenzo, who was coming off a difficult few years with both Yamaha and Ducati. However, like with Dani, Jorge also struggled to adapt to the Honda, but it seemed like he was having more difficulty with the bike than what Dani was, as the highest finish that he would achieve throughout that season would be a dismal 11th place at Le Mans. This, combined with the numerous amounts of injuries that he had as well, which arguably shot his confidence over the previous few seasons, led to him also retiring from MotoGP at the end of 2019, despite still having another year on his contract. For 2020, Marc would be partnered by his brother Alex Marquez, and given they were brothers, you would be forgiven for thinking that both of them would have a similar riding style and would mean that both would be fighting towards the front. However, even in the only race Marc did in 2020, the gap between the two brothers was relatively big, as Alex would finish the first race of the season in a dismal 12th, whilst Marc, before his unfortunate accident, was fighting towards the front. When Stefan Bradl replaced Marc for the rest of 2020 and for the first 2 races of 2021, it exposed a major flaw in Honda's way of developing the bike. Because the bike was catered towards Marc's riding style, both Stefan and even Marc's brother Alex struggled to adapt and struggled to get the bike towards the front of the field. The only occasions it did fight towards the front in 2020, outside of race 1, was at Le Mans due to changeable conditions, and at the 2 races at Aragon due to the fact that the circuit suited Alex's riding style. Because the entire philosophy at Honda was to build the bike around Marc, it neglected the other riders who were riding the bike as well. And because Marc was injured, it meant that Honda couldn't rely on Marc's feedback, meaning as a result, the bike slipped down the pecking order. When Marc did return in 2021, the bike was still relatively decent when he was riding it, even with the limitations he had on his right arm. The 3 races he won that year proving that. However, when he missed the final 2 races of the season due to injury again, the team once again fell behind on development. To make things even worse, Pol Espargaro, who finished 6th at the penultimate race, withdrew from the finale at Valencia due to also picking up an injury. And because the team opted not to replace Marc at Valencia, it meant that no Repsol Honda bikes took part in the race. As Marc would pick up more injuries throughout 2022, it really affected Honda's development. As the more races Marc missed because of injury, the more performance Honda would lose compared to their rivals, given they were solely relying on Marc's feedback. This as a result meant that by the time off-season testing came about, it was very clear that the Honda was not in a position to fight for the title due to the lack of feedback. Once a few races were completed in 2023, it was very clear that Honda were on the back foot. Whilst they were slightly ahead of Yamaha, who themselves had also gone backwards, they were behind the likes of Aprilia, KTM and most notably Ducati, with the gap between themselves and Ducati being relatively huge. Even the 2022 Ducati that is being used by both VR46 and Gresini are also way ahead of Honda. And because both Marc and teammate Joan Mir were trying to go beyond the bike's design capabilities in order to get something out of it, it led to more crashes and even injuries for both Marc and Joan. Even Alex Rins, who's riding the LCR Honda, was having the same issues. So in the end, it's not surprising that Marc left Honda. However, what some people viewing from the outside may be confused about is why he's moving to a satellite Ducati that will be running a year-old machine. Well, 2 reasons. One, he reunites with his brother Alex, who's been having a great season on that bike despite some bad luck he's had this season. And secondly, and the most important reason, it's a Ducati. Even though the bike that Marc will be riding will be a year old Ducati is still fast enough to compete for the title. An example of this is with the VR46 squad, specifically Marco Bezzecchi. Marco, who rides for that team, is currently having the season of his life, picking up 3 main race victories, God, I hate saying those terms, and currently lying 3rd in the championship, which if it wasn't for the bad luck that he has been having in the sprint races this year, he would be up there with both Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin, both of which are riding factory machinery. Martin riding a Pramac Ducati, whilst Pecco riding for the Ducati factory team. To make the Marquez deal make even more sense, Marco Bezzecchi himself recently turned down the opportunity to join the Pramac Ducati team, which will be running up-to-date machinery, to continue riding for VR46, which will continue to run year-old Ducatis. Whether it's an up-to-date or a year-old Ducati, both versions are just as quick as each other, and with Marc running the same Ducatis that the VR46 squad are running, there's a chance that Marc could be back to challenging for the title. Whether he does or not remains to be seen. Overall, given the amount of frustrations that have been boiling over the last year or so, it's not surprising that Marc has called it a day at Honda a year before his contract was supposed to end. However, given the success that they have had together, it is very sad that it has ended in this way. At the same time though, I think this split will be a great benefit for both sides. For Honda, they can finally use these next few years to rebuild themselves and bring in a new philosophy to try and bring themselves back to the front of the field. And with Joan Mir essentially becoming the new team leader from next season, despite initial rumours that he could have also have left, Honda have themselves a rider who has proven he can win championships that they can build their future around. Although I hope for their sake they don't neglect the second rider this time around, whoever that might be. As for Marc Marquez himself, the opportunity to redeem his career and return to the front of the field on a Ducati is an exciting prospect for any rider and any fan. After a few years in the wilderness for reasons beyond his control, the opportunity to once again challenge for a championship is something Marc, I'm sure, will grab with both hands. And personally, I hope he does achieve that redemption story, as like with most people, I still believe he has one more championship left in him before he retires. and if for some reason it doesn't work out at Gresini, I'm pretty sure a factory team other than Ducati will want his services. So all the best, Marc, and hopefully for your sake you can finally complete that redemption arc, because what a fairy tale story that would be. Bet you any money I'll be sitting here this time next year talking about Fabio Quartararo's relationship with Yamaha. Mark my words.